Poison is an alternate version of Peter Parker inspired by the Spider-Man story The Other. He hails from a what if where we explore the idea of what would have happened had Spider-Man rejected his connection to the spider within. Rejected instead of embracing his role as a spider totem, of course. This would have left Peter vulnerable basically to outside attack. Trapped within his cocoon with no way out, the symbiotic being that we often refer to as Venom sensed Peter's vulnerability and saw a chance to merge with him. Venom then leaves Matt Gargan to forcibly connect with Peter, and together they become Poison. Poison is horrifying and attempts to recruit Mary Jane as his partner, but after she rejects him, he believes that the corpse of Gwen Stacy will suit him better. Oh my goodness. Speaking of this weird, very weird ship though, do you agree with Peter? Who do you ship Spider-Man with? Do you ship him with Gwen? Do you ship him with MJ? Maybe it's Black Cat, maybe it's someone else. This future version of Spider-Man hails from a bleak reality. Here Peter ends up working at a flower shop after years of being a hero. No longer operating as Spider-Man, this version of Peter has become somewhat senile, frail, and honestly pretty old. He's also haunted by his past, having hallucinations of Mary Jane, who is of course now long dead. Mary Jane in this reality apparently died from being, how do I put this, intimately close to Peter, which he carries immense guilt over, obviously. Apparently his radioactiveness was not so good for MJ's body, ended up giving her cancer and sadly killed her in the end. Peter eventually does return to heroics, but even then it's a pretty sad return, with him mostly getting his butt whooped when he isn't busy being swept up in some kind of fantasy or hallucination that is built around his past. I-APEC is known in Marvel Comics as I-APEC the Decapitator and was once worshipped as a god in Peru. I-APEC is typically shown as having pointed teeth, snakes for hair with multiple arms, and his lower half being the hairy body and legs of, well, a spider. He ended up getting recruited to Norman Osborn's Dark Avengers to act as their Spider-Man after Norman Osborn escaped the raft the second time, this time successfully, and attempted to resurrect his organization, which was initially created to replace S.H.I.E.L.D., known as Hammer, which if you're wondering it doesn't stand for anything, and bring back his Dark Avengers. I-APEC was made to look more humanoid as a result here, more like Spider-Man with a genetic formula. Though unlike Spider-Man, he did still have 4 arms. Or well, unlike Spider-Man most days. Later on, he would also be coerced into serving on Luke Cage's Dark Avengers, which were actually kinda like DC's Suicide Squad. Matt Gargan is known as the Spider-Man villain Scorpion, but at one point he too became an alternate version of Spider-Man, don't you know? Albeit a really messed up and twisted version, as he served as Spider-Man for Norman Osborn's Dark Avengers, right at the start before I-APEC. As expected, Osborn's Dark Avengers team was primarily made up of villains who were typically posing as their own heroic counterparts. In Mac's case, the heroic mantle he was made to fill in for was, of course, Spider-Man. Although he wasn't so much Spider-Man but an alternate Venom posing as Spider-Man. His suit was made of the symbiotic being known as Venom, who was merged with him at the time. And this often turned Matt Gargan's Spider-Man into a pretty horrifying monster who threatened to, and often actually did, devour those people who stood in his way. Even sometimes almost eating his own teammates. Not a great team player. In fact, Norman Osborn had to put in some work to control Venom at times, and to also make him look less horror story and more friendly neighborhood. This is a version of Peter Parker who also merged with the Carnage symbiote and was possibly driven criminally insane by it. Or was criminally insane to begin with in this reality, perhaps. This version of Peter hails from the reality of Earth 15. Not much is known about his home reality, mainly what we know of it involved Peter's own history. This alternate version of the character bonded with the alien symbiote that is often referred to as Carnage under the 616. He became notorious for the terrible acts that he committed and became known as a killer, a criminal who apparently enjoyed hurting people. He made his first appearance in the Exiles at issue number 12, where he showed up with a team of other heroes who were drafted into a multiversal version of Weapon X. Heroes. In the same future that MC2 Peter and his daughter Mayday, aka Spider-Woman, hail from, known as the alternate reality of Earth 982, Jessica Drew, aka also Spider-Woman, also has a child. MC2 is widely known for being the reality where superheroes get to grow up, retire, or settle down to live a somewhat normal life. Sometimes also amidst continued heroics for those who don't end up retiring. As such, Jessica is also one of those heroes. She gets married and ends up pregnant, but unfortunately her son Jerry is born with a rare blood-borne illness. Oh no. In an attempt to cure Jerry, Jessica submits him to the same experimentation which saved her as a child, and also gave her her spider powers. The same happens to Jerry, who also gets spider powers and ends up becoming a hero, taking up the mantle of Spider-Man after being inspired by stories that his mom tells him of her days as a hero, and of course after being inspired inspired probably by also Spider-Man's adventures. This next version of Peter hails from the reality belonging to the series Marvel Universe vs. the Punisher, the reality of 11080, where Frank Castle, aka the Punisher, was the last known survivor who was forced to take on, you guessed it, the entire Marvel Universe after the world was ravaged by a deadly and horrifying plague. Here, Peter ends up becoming Patient Zero after a virus is accidentally released that turns people into violent cannibals. Peter himself devours Rhino during a hockey match and is taken to be researched by the Fantastic Four. However, he does not stay quarantined as the virus spreads to Ben Grimm of the FF, who releases him, and he goes on to become the leader of one of the tribes involved in a turf war. The Punisher ends up killing him after helping to rescue a pregnant Mary Jane in exchange for information that Patient Zero has. Spider-Man has to be one of my all-time favorite alternate characters in the history of Marvel. I just love that she became a full-fledged hero in her own right, and that she helped to defeat the Inheritors the second time around, while also deciding to raise all the then made baby versions of them. I was really thinking if anyone could have, helped the Inheritors to grow up to not be spider totem devouring villains, it would have been Aunt May, if it was possible. Spider-Man hails from the Earth of 3123 and comes from What If issue number 23 originally, where we asked the question, what would happen if Aunt May had been bitten by a radioactive spider in the place of her nephew, Peter Parker? The answer is Spider-Man, and I love it. Spider-Man 2211 is like Spider-Man 2099, but from even further into the future. He is known as a time spinner and does his best to protect the time field. This version of Spider-Man is named Max Bourne, and his appearance also differs from the Spider-Man of Earth 616 and the Spider-Man of 2099, in the regard that his costume has multiple mechanized arms, kind of like Dr. Octopus, or more specifically, like Dr. Octopus's look when he becomes Spider-Man and is known as Superior Spider-Man. Max Bourne's arch-nemesis is Hobgoblin of 2211, who it turns out is actually his own daughter, Robin. Along with Spider-Man of Earth 616 and Spider-Man of 2099, he faces and defeats Hobgoblin only for her true identity to be revealed to him. Gosh. Patton Parnell has to be one of the most evil incarnations of Spider-Man around, and he also has to be one of my favorites. He literally becomes a Spider-Man, turning into a spider-like human hybrid after he is bit by a radioactive spider. Patton was also kind of always a creepy kid, likely as a result of mistreatment that he suffered at the mercy of his Uncle Ted. He had a crush on his next-door neighbor, Sarah Jane, and enjoyed disturbing scientific pursuits such as burning ants with a magnifying glass. When he transformed into Spider-Man, he became more confident in himself, but also acquired a taste for live animal and human flesh. He also was capable of laying eggs, as Uncle Ted would horrifyingly and personally find out after young Patton took revenge on him. And I'll just leave that image in your mind.
At number 10 is the cinematic Madame Web. Madame Web is about Cassandra Webb, a paramedic with a unique power to see into the future after a near unaliving experience. The trailer hints at her struggle to understand these visions until she sees a dangerous man planning something awful. Even though she's not sure why, she knows she has to stop him. Now, the trailer doesn't really say which universe this story is in, or why the bad guy's outfit looks exactly like Spider-Man's, but it does tease that Cassandra's friends will become different spider-themed heroes like in the Marvel comics. Now, it's a bit odd because just like with the Venom movies, this one seems packed with Spider-Man stuff, but lacking Spider-Man himself. Still, with the third Spider-Verse movie on the way and big things happening in the MCU, maybe it's not that surprising. Madame Web hits theaters on February 14th, 2024, and it looks like it's going to be filled with classic Spider-Man characters, even if Spidey himself isn't swinging by. I love that the Spider-Verse and Spidey villains like Kraven and Venom and Morbius and now Madame Web are getting their own films from Sony, but I just can't help but feel like someone's missing, don't you think? Like, come on, Sony, just give me like a Miles cameo at least. At number 9 is Julia Carpenter, the second iteration of Madame Web in 616. Julia Cornwall's life took various turns before becoming Madame Web. Growing up in Los Angeles, she experienced the joy of marriage and motherhood only to face heartbreak when her husband cheated, leading to their divorce. Now, her journey into superhero status was also unconventional. criminal. As part of a government experiment, she was unwittingly injected with a blend of spider venom and plant extracts, endowing her with the abilities akin to Spider-Man's powers. She became the Spider-Woman and later got entangled in a perilous scheme orchestrated by the Karninoff family, where Madame Web, mortally wounded, transferred her extraordinary powers to Julia. This transformed her into the new Madame Web, despite rendering her blind. Julia, now the weaver of the Spider family's destiny, possessed exceptional abilities like precognition and astral projection. Her newfound powers even hinted at possible teleportation, though it's more likely she just projected vivid images to appear elsewhere. Her role expanded beyond foreshadowing alternate futures, guiding heroes, and even preventing catastrophic outcomes. If you're enjoying the video so far, you can support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. And number 8 is Gwen Stacy's Madame Web. Gwen Stacy in this reality is known as Madame Web, but she didn't expect to become a leader in a multiverse filled with spider-themed figures. Her journey began unexpectedly due to a convergence of realities. As someone experienced in navigating different dimensions, Gwen took on the responsibility of welcoming and guiding displaced individuals in this Spider-Verse. However, tragic events unfolded, shattering her initial plans. Spider people, united by their shared trauma, faced a grave threat when they unwittingly brought in symbiotes during their quest for solutions. This sparked a prolonged battle, resulting in significant losses, and amidst the darkness, Gwen Stacy emerged as a beacon of hope, transforming into Madame Web almost overnight. This Madame Web shoulders the responsibility of overseeing the well-being of all the inhabitants, human or otherwise, in this merged reality. Fun fact is that her arsenal also includes a web crossbow concealed as a cane, which is super dope. At number 7 is Spider-Zero. Spider-Zero is a young woman possessing spider-like abilities who traversed the multiverse after her home universe's destruction. Disconnected from any specific reality, she adapted as the Master Weaver within the web of life and destiny. When the Pattern Maker vanished and the web faltered, Spider-Zero sought Spider-Man's aid to locate Annie and mend the corrupted web. During a mission to rescue Spider-Ling from a tangled node, Spider-Zero grappled with the haunting memories of her original reality, and despite the turmoil, she worked with Miles to resolve the crisis, restoring balance to the web. Afterwards, while other spider heroes returned to their respective dimensions, Spider-Zero chose to remain within the web. Her journey, defined by transcending realities and safeguarding the web's integrity, exemplifies her commitment to maintaining balance across the multiverse. At number 6 is the Widow of the Web from Earth. The Widow of the Web is an alternate version of Madame Web, who's steeped in mystical abilities. She possesses a profound sorcery, utilizing it to grant powers to the Web Slinger, imposing a condition that forbids using these abilities for personal gain. Now, following a crucial event where the Web Slinger violated this condition, the Widow of the Web bestowed him with a heavy burden of responsibility, compelling him to become the guardian of Webwood. Her powers encompass a diverse range of magical abilities, including the capability to bestow powers upon others and generate organic webbing. Although her exact proficiency in magic remains unspecified, her association with mystical practices hints at a considerable command over these forces. Notably, the Widow of the Web is speculated to share connections with Madame Web or Spider-Woman, but the specifics of these connections remain ambiguous and open to interpretation. At number 5 is Madame Web from Earth 51914. This Madame Web is an obscure character introduced in a 1977 Hostess Twinkies ad, which is a vengeful figure fixated on Spider-Man. Her obsession stemmed from Spider-Man's rejection, prompting her to use her spidery abilities to ensnare New York Harbor, aiming to frame Spider-Man. However, her scheme was foiled when Spider-Man offered her Hostess Twinkies cakes as a bribe, persuading her to relinquish her plan and clear his name. Notably, this version of Madame Web is distinct from the more recognized Madame Web in the Marvel Universe. This portrayal holds no affiliation with the established characters Madame Web or her subsequent successor, Madame Web. At number 4 is Spinster. Spinster is a unique totem in the Spider-Verse, using her prehensile hair to produce webbing and perceive vibrations across the webs. As a superhero, she possessed the extraordinary ability to interpret every movement transmitted through her webbing, enabling her to eavesdrop from a great distance. Initially originating as a fan-created character called Spider-Sona, Spinster was later featured in Marvel Comics Spider-Verse Volume 3. Marvel reached out to fans to create new Spider-Sonas for the Spider-Verse, leading to Spinster's introduction into the Spider-Verse profile in issue number 1, and subsequent appearances in issue 6 alongside other Spider-Sonas. The Spinster's inclusion in the Spider-Verse narrative brought her into adventure alongside established characters like Spider-Man and Spider-Zero. At number 3 is Neith. Neith is a deity in the Marvel Universe who embodies the role of the goddess of spiders. Born to powerful elder goddess Oshter and Gaia, she's the younger sister of Shathra, the wasp goddess. Neith's story involves a celestial task where her sister Shathra was assigned to design a map of the multiverse. While Shathra focused on an intricate design called the Great Nest, Neith crafted her own creation, the Great Web, suggesting a more straightforward approach. Impressed by Neith's innovative design, the goddess acknowledged her creation, showcasing it to other gods and crowning her as the shaper of the multiverse. This success, however, kindled jealousy in Shathra, leading to her transformation into a dark goddess filled with spite and desire for revenge. Neith's character is depicted as playful, preferring relaxation and playfulness over intense work. She advocates for free will, evident in her design of the Web of Life and Destiny, offering humanity the liberty to forge their own paths. Her creation of the spider served as assistance, allowing her to avoid the arduous task of maintaining the web herself. At number 2 is Edna Brock, aka Madame Venom. In Extreme Venomverse number 3, we're introduced to a Madame Brock from Earth 31913, a symbiote variant that's an absolute game changer. She seamlessly blends classic Venom traits with fresh ideas and a touch of Madame Web's mystique, offering a unique take on the character. Now let's take a moment to talk about Webslinger, a cowboy Spider-Man from the same reality. After a chance encounter in a small town, he befriends Edna Brock, aka Madame Web. Now she's not your average Venom variant. With her whip as her weapon, she embraces the lethal protector ideology, adding a new layer to the character. Madame Web's design is a fusion of Venom's monstrous appearance with a classic western twist with that black veil of hers, making her a visual standout. But the most exciting part, Madame Brock's connection to the Web of Life and Destiny could make her a key player in multiverse-level events. This new Venom variant is a breath of fresh air and one of the most intriguing additions to the Marvel Universe. And at number 1 is Cassandra Webb. That's 2 B's, y'all. Respect the second B. Just want to take a moment to give respects to the OG. Cassandra Webb from Salem, Oregon had a unique life. Blind from birth, she faced challenges due to a condition called myasthenia gravis. I totally butchered that. Surprisingly, her blindness led to psychic abilities, turning her into a medium. Later on in a significant event, she engaged in an arcane ritual involving 5 relics. This ritual granted immense power or dire consequences. These relics, combined in a ritual, bestowed the following powers: power, knowledge, immortality, insanity, and the state of being unalive. These powers weren't what they seemed at first. What first seemed like madness was in fact knowledge, what seemed like power was madness, and what seemed like being unalive was actually immortality. Cassandra Webb received immortality, but this blessing was actually just a catch-22. You see, while Madame Webb would be immortal, that really just meant that the Madame Webb legacy would continue on through Julia Carpenter, while Cassandra Webb herself is just as mortal as you or I.
Coming in at number 10 is Earth 616. Most fans of Miles Morales know this already, but for those who aren't aware, the Miles Morales that has become the second Spider-Man and who all the alternate Miles are based on is actually not native to the main Marvel universe. That Miles actually comes from Marvel's Ultimate Universe, the Earth 1610 universe. So then, that kind of begs the question of who and where the heck is the main continuity Miles Morales? Well, he's there, but he is much different. Miles Morales was a member of the Rigoletto crime family who ended up with a 3-year sentence in Rikers Island to cover for his cousin, which got him the respect of the family and of Wilson Fisk, who Miles saved in prison. Miles and Fisk opened a restaurant together after they both got out, and when Wilson took over the crime family, he let Miles go and live a happy life with his wife. Unfortunately though, when his wife passed away, Miles went to find the same woman in an alternate universe, which brought him into conflict with Peter Parker and the main Miles Morales Spider-Man, and eventually brought him to Earth 1610, the Ultimate Universe, where he found his love again. Now when he returned to Earth 616, Miles had outfitted himself with an Ant-Man suit, Iron Man repulsors, and a Captain America looking shield, and he brought some friends in order to face his younger Miles counterpart and try and run the streets of New York once again. Number 9. Thor. Last year, in 2022, in case you were watching this from the future, we got a whole series of What If comics centered specifically around the character of Miles Morales, and each issue of that comic gave us a different Miles who had taken after a different hero. For the 4th issue of this series, the World Tree of Yggdrasil had found itself in Brooklyn, creating a version of Brooklyn that was Asgardified, or an Asgard that has been Brooklynified? I guess, you pick. In case you haven't guessed, the Miles Morales of temporary reality number 951 has indeed become Thor Odin's son. All the other classic pillars of the Thor mythos are here too, substituted with Miles' mom and dad for Frigga and Odin, his friends substituting as the Warriors 3, and of course his uncle Aaron as the trickster god Loki, who tricks Thor Odin's son Morales into stealing the skull of the frost giant Laufey in order to impress his pops. If you check this one out, please let me know what you think of all the rhyming and rapping this version of Miles tries to do, and if it made you cringe like it made me cringe, because it really did make me cringe like quite a lot. Why did they do that? I don't know. Number 8. Ultimate Spider-Ham. Spider-Ham is one of the most popular alternate versions of Spider-Man out there, but he is just an alternate version of Peter Parker. Luckily for us, his popularity coupled with the popularity of Miles Morales gave us Miles Morhames. Yes, that is his name, and he is the ultimate Spider-Pig. As is the case in seemingly all universes, Miles' uncle was secretly a masked criminal known in this universe as the Fowler. One of the items Fowler had stolen turned out to be a radioactive spider, which is the one that bit Miles, granting him his spider abilities. Following the passing of the original Spider-Ham when he defeated the Green Gobbler once and for all, Miles stepped up to take his mantle in order to become the ultimate Spider-Ham. The world that Miles hailed from, Earth 14094, ended up actually being destroyed by Dr. Doom after the world was saved from Galactopus, who, he's not an octopus, but get this, Galactus is a platypus. I mean, come on. I feel like I'm way too excited about this. After the destruction of his reality, Miles traveled the multiverse, warning other universes of how to protect themselves against calamity until he arrived on Earth 1610, where he stayed. Number 7. Hulk. I wasn't done with the What If Miles Morales stories yet. I can't just give you guys one of those awesome Miles Moraleses. I can give you all the Miles Moraleses. Yeah, Miles Morales in this issue is very much like his normal self until the day that Uncle Aaron made a deal with Emil Blonsky. Aaron found himself in possession of a suspicious briefcase. Noticing a spider on said briefcase, Miles attempted to kill it, but instead accidentally knocked over the briefcase, which caused him to step on a nuclear cartridge, exposing himself to gamma radiation, and well, he got Hulkified in the middle of the night. Miles tries to keep his transformations on the down low and under control, enlisting the help of his friend Genki, who didn't believe him until Miles stepped on a Lego, which, as we all should know, causes a rage and turned him into the Hulk. Eventually, Miles spied on his uncle as the Prowler as he was dealing with Emil, which is when his uncle made an attempt at Emil's life. Now during the kerfuffle, another briefcase was dropped and Uncle Aaron also found himself being exposed to gamma radiation, but this time he was turned into the Abomination. Number 6. Into the Spider-Verse. Yes, of course we have to talk about the version of Miles Morales appearing in the awesome animated Spider-Verse movies. Voiced by actor Shameik Moore, this version of Miles Morales brought the character to a very large audience with an origin story that differed slightly from his original counterpart, but it also still retains enough elements of that original story, which I believe is part of the reason his universe designation is Earth 1610B instead of having its own separate reality number. The best part of this Miles Morales though is when the Spider-Verse opens up and he gets to interact with the various other Spider-Men and women across the multiverse. The first movie was an absolute hit. It had a dope soundtrack, an amazing animation style with a superb cast, hilarious writing, and a heap of heartfelt moments. Now I have yet to see the sequel, but I am super excited to see where this Miles Morales goes with his story. Number 5. Mayor. This version of Miles Morales comes at us from the series known as The End, which basically chronicles the final stories of various different heroes in the Marvel landscape. Some of the most famous of these stories have been the Hulk The End and Deadpool The End, but for Miles Morales, his possible alternate future takes place decades from now in a ravaged place that was once New York City. Most places on Earth had been ravaged by monsters known as the Germs, with Brooklyn being one of the few places that had been saved and protected by this massive shield. Side note, I like how germs are the monsters here. Like, it's kind of like all those things you learn about as kids when germs were like little monsters, but now they're actual monsters. Kind of hilarious, kind of cool. I don't know. But after becoming Spider-Man and letting the world know his identity, Miles was chosen as mayor of Brooklyn and as its protector. He faced off against a Captain America wannabe known as Captain Last and his One America army of raiders. After Captain Last eventually merges with a germ in order to attack Brooklyn, Miles sacrifices his life to bring the Captain down and save the lives of everyone in Brooklyn. Good job. Way to go. Number 4, Wolverine. Yep, it's another Miles Morales what if, and I don't know why Wolverine is the last person I expected to see in this series, but I'm extremely okay with it. Miles Morales in this world is instead a mutant with the same abilities as Wolverine. When he is younger, Miles is stolen away alongside other children by Weapon X, who turn him into the adamantium skeleton superweapon just like the regular Wolverine. Now fast forward a few years, and now in this world, Sentinels are being used to hunt down mutants by S.H.I.E.L.D. And after Miles takes out like 3 of them, S.H.I.E.L.D. sends this super cool looking warrior wielding an adamantium katana to take Miles out. This awesome S.H.I.E.L.D. warrior turns out to be Miles' father, and once he discovers this Wolverine mutant is his own son, he instead turns on S.H.I.E.L.D., which is when they send in Miles' uncle Aaron, who seems to be this world's version of Sabretooth. Miles' father defends his son to his dying breath until Miles jumps in to beat Sabretooth to a pulp and almost ends him before his father convinces him not to and to instead be a hero. It all wraps up with the X-Men showing up to recruit Miles, but led by Professor X, who is Genki Lee. It's just wild. It's so cool. Number 3, Vision Miles. No, this is not a highly advanced android version of Miles Morales. It is, in fact, the Miles Morales who exists in a possible future shown to us in a vision from the inhuman precog known as Ulysses Kane. The reason I want to talk about this seemingly insignificant version of Miles Morales who only appeared in a vision is because this Miles was able to take the life of Captain America. Now obviously Captain America is not an indestructible guy. He's not the most powerful hero and he could probably be taken out by any number of heroes, but the respect that Captain America carries and the influence he has makes him one of those characters that you simply do not see being taken out very often. So, to see it happen here in Civil War II at the hands of Miles Morales on the steps of the ruined United States Capitol building in the reality of Earth 61115 is one hell of a shocking image. I want to know what happens after Miles does this, but we won't know until a writer decides to take the initiative to put out a story set in this alternate crazy reality. Number 2, the Falcon. Temporary reality number 852 gave us a Miles whose history is similar to his Earth 1610 counterparts, only he never gained powers from a genetically engineered spider. Instead, this Miles' favorite heroes were the totally underrated Nighthawk and his sidekick and partner, the Falcon. Unfortunately, like how Spider-Man lost his life to the Goblin in the Ultimate reality, in this one, it's the Falcon that ultimately croaked at the hands of the Goblin. This devastated Miles, and he took it as his opportunity to take the reins. Creating a costume similar to the Falcon's using his electrical engineering skills, Miles aided Nighthawk as he was battling the villains Scorpion and Scorpia, but Nighthawk was not too receptive to this pretender coming in and trying to replace his old partner. Wanting to prove to Nighthawk that he could be a hero, Miles created the Young Squadron with Kid Spectrum and Girl Power. While Miles and the Young Squadron were fighting the Wrecking Crew, Miles was stolen away by the Goblin's partner Deadpool, who was attempting to make sure the Falcon Mantle never came back. Deadpool was eventually defeated by the other members of the Young Squadron, and after handing Deadpool over to Nighthawk, Miles and the Young Squadron decided to be a better team than the other heroes of their reality. And finally, in at number 1, Captain America. Yes, we are rounding off today's list with the very first of the What If Miles Morales stories, which in my opinion is one of the best. In the very first issue, Miles' dad is part of the new super soldier program inspired by the original that created Captain America. Uncle Aaron, who always plays a large part in Miles' life, steals the super soldier serum and keeps it in his fridge, which which is where Miles finds it looking for a drink. It turns out Miles is actually a perfect match for the serum, and he becomes the new Captain America. It's super cool because not only is Miles the new Cap, but Tiana Toombs becomes the Falcon, and Sam Wilson becomes the new director of S.H.I.E.L.D. with the eye patch and everything. Uncle Aaron becomes Prowler after being attacked by Black Widow, and Lonnie Lincoln is the Grey Skull, which is this reality's Red Skull. Miles here seems to be just as powerful as the normal Captain America, if not a little younger, and by extension, a little bit more naive. Coming in at number 10 is the Amazing Spider. On Earth 11638, Uncle Ben never loses his life, and instead, he helps train Peter Parker with his new spider powers, and eventually even helps him to form Parker Industries. Now, given the title of this list, you should know that things aren't all hunky-dory. Peter and Uncle Ben end up building a machine that allows Peter to lure alternate versions of Spider-Man to his reality, where he then absorbs their powers to increase his own, making him the most powerful hero on Earth and eliminating the need for any other hero, but also taking the lives of other alternate hims. See, that did take a very dark turn. When he tried to do this to the Spider-Man from Earth 616, our Spider-Man, this powerful version of Peter loses his life and his soul is sent to Hell, where, with the assistance of the Infernal Hulk, he is fused with the spirit of vengeance, becoming the Ghost Spider. Not the Gwen Stacy Ghost Spider, but a Ghost Rider Spider. A Ghost Rider Spider. That's what we're going with. Ghost Rider, for any who don't know, is insanely powerful. He has been called in to deal with the Hulk and has even gone toe-to-toe with Galactus, so this Spider-Man Ghost Rider hybrid is no joke at all. Plus he's kinda evil and he looks really cool. Number 9. Assassin Spider-Man. In What If Spider-Man vs. Wolverine number 1, we are introduced to Spider Assassin, a Spider-Man variant who is just a little bit more loose when it comes to the morals that he follows. In his universe, with great power comes great responsibility and greater enemies, which led the Peter of Earth 8351 to leave New York City in order to protect his family from the villains who would make personal strikes against him. Instead, Peter joined up with Wolverine, and because of their time traveling and working together, he is much less opposed to sending criminals to the afterlife, meaning he does it on the regulars. He is also almost always serious, not doing his normal quips and jokes that we are really used to from Peter, who usually uses it to cope with difficult or precarious situations. His serious nature is also reflected in his costume, with a much darker look, especially those black eyes, which are really cool. His web shooters have also been shown to shoot black webs in some panels, and they also include some more lethal means of dealing with his foes. He is an effective addition to the Spider-Man army though when it was formed, and an extremely effective Spider-Man just in general. Number 8. Marvel Universe vs. The Punisher. In this universe, the Punisher interrupts an arms deal involving what he thinks is a briefcase nuke, only to discover that it is in fact a man-made virus that, for Frank Castle, makes him immune to infection, illness, and disease. That's really good, but it didn't quite do this for everyone else. The problem here is that the chemical weapon found its way into the water supply and then into the food, and started in New York, spreading to the whole world through infected travelers. And then it started turning people and heroes into starting with Spider-Man. Spider-Man of Earth 11080 became infected with one of Marvel's deadliest viruses, which transformed him into a raging tribal. He viciously ate the Rhino on live TV and started an infection that eventually took over the entire world. In this new post-apocalypse, this terrifyingly evil Spider-Man became Patient Zero and took control of a portion of the former New York City, facing a rival tribe of other man-eaters led by the Kingpin, who took Spider-Man's mate, Mary Jane, prompting Patient Zero Spider-Man to hire the immune Frank Castle to rescue her. But then he met his sticky end, so Number 7. Spider from Earth 15. There are a lot of characters who go by the name of the Spider, including a pulp hero from way back in the day, but specifically today we are talking about a Peter Parker variant that's bonded with the Carnage symbiote coming from Earth 15. The Spider of Earth 15 is a much more sadistic, sociopathic, red-headed version of Peter Parker, and that's the scary part. He's a ginger. He even claims that he has been sentenced to a total of 67 life sentences in prison for the crimes that he has committed, but of course, to make him just a bit more lovable, he has a sense of humor very much like that of Deadpool. It's great, if not a little unnerving. The Spider was introduced in Exiles number 12 and was a big part of the reality-saving Weapon X team featured in that story, being a sometimes leader of the team. As a Carnage-bonded sociopath, he was pretty powerful, but he nonetheless was sent to the afterlife by a blast from Firestar in Exiles number 44. When you're dealing with the multiverse, there is bound to be someone stronger than you, no matter what you do and who you are, even if you're a scary Spider-Man. Number 6. Zombie Spider-Man. Yes, Zombie Spider-Man is essentially the same Spider-Man everyone is used to, all the same powers at least, except after being bit by a zombie, he now also has a ravenous hunger that cannot be sated no matter what, combined with the fact that he is essentially undead and can take a whole whack more punishment. Both of those factors led him and a group of other heroes, who were zombified, to consume the Silver Surfer and Galactus, which gave them all the power cosmic. With the power cosmic, the zombie Galacti, which is what they called themselves, have the ability to absorb and tap ambient cosmic energy into their bodies at will and expel those energies, like channeling beams of energy through their hands and teleporting through time and space, devouring entire planets. With this power, they have the potential to phase through objects, accelerate the evolution of life forms, see the past by peeling back the layers of time, time travel, and manipulate, absorb, and discharge any form of energy or radiation. But they mainly use it to get to the next snack. Though Spider-Zombie loses all this power eventually, he still had it and was an incredibly powerful version of Spider-Man, and also a really scary one because he would eat your face. Number 5. Dark Ages. Dark Ages is, in my opinion, a pretty underrated story. Essentially, a superpowered machine known as the Unmaker was causing massive devastation in the core of the planet, and in an attempt to stop the threat, a portal created by Doctor Strange released an EMP that completely crippled the world's technology. The story essentially sees the world rebuilding itself without the use of any advanced technology, while also dealing with the many threats of the world, including werewolves, vampires, and supervillains, specifically the mutant apocalypse. Now, Miles Morales was one of the survivors of this new society, although here, Miles became bonded to the Venom symbiote, which he used to try and help people during the first early years. They worked really well together until the Carnage symbiote also forcibly bonded itself to Miles as well. Now, this isn't like Carnage kicked out Venom or anything like that. It's Carnage corrupting Venom, and the two symbiotes together both agreed to take over Miles' body. And they even went to work for Apocalypse in exchange for a ship to escape the Earth. All the while, Miles remained unconscious, being used as an unwilling host. It sounds horrifying because it is. That's scary. Number 4. Poison. Ever since the first time Venom and Spider-Man bonded together, that pesky little symbiote would continuously try to merge with Peter Parker, but he would only get about halfway before Peter could repel him. Now, what happens if Venom finally gets what he wants? Well, in the What If Spider-Man The Other story, we get to find out. After Peter is semi-defeated by Morlun and cocoons himself under Brooklyn Bridge, he is offered the chance to be resurrected by the Spider God called The Other. But instead of allowing this like he does in the normal continuity, Peter refuses and is instead stuck in his cocoon, half alive. Now we cut to Venom, who, being Spider-Man's crazy ex-girlfriend, senses the vulnerability of his soulmate and completely ditches his current host, Mac Gargan. He intercepts Peter's body, and after months of struggling inside the cocoon, monstrously breaking down Peter Parker, Venom fully bonds to Peter. Now the pair are truly one and the same, with all the fully realized powers that come with being a symbiote, which include being able to replicate itself and host more than one body, producing stingers that are strong enough to pierce Luke Cage's skin, and the newly dubbed being, known as Poison, was even able to resurrect Gwen Stacy in a form that seems to take after Venom's offspring, Carnage. Number 3. Spider-Man Pestilence. Yes, that's right, everyone's favorite web-slinger was a Horseman of Apocalypse at more than one point, but every time he has been, he was Pestilence. So yes, you lucky nerds are getting 2 points in one here. Look at that! Don't say I never gave you anything, ever. On Earth 5701, Peter goes full spider in his horseman form with 4 arms and 4 legs. It's actually super freaky and I do not like it. He, Archangel, and Famine are tasked with going on a merry reality hopping hunt of Cable, which they ultimately fail at. Now in the Earth 10082 reality, Peter is Pestilence again, but a different kind of terrifying as he is fused with his Pestilence steed because of the techno-organic virus, becoming all white and hairy and pure nightmare fuel. He's like a person with a horse on him. It's scary. He and the other horsemen of this reality go to the mainline Earth to fight the Avengers with Apocalypse, and they kind of lose, but whatever. Number 2, Spidersman. In Spider-Geddon number 3 of 2018, we are introduced to Spidersman, a colony of thousands of radioactively powered spiders who, in a moment of absolute horror, consumed a high school kid by the name of Peter Parker when he fell into their enclosure at Horizon Labs. After consuming Peter Parker, something strange happened. Instead of the spiders just going about their lives, the whole gaggle of spiders gained a sort of hive mind, and they took on the form of Peter himself and began fighting crime in the aptly named Cruel York of Earth 11580. Other than his usual Spider-Man powers and the benefits of being a swarm of spiders, the colony is also able to poison its victims with a bite, or if they're hungry for power, they can devour them whole. And it's incredibly hard to actually take out this version of Spider-Man, as even a single spider of the thousands who make up this being survives. It means technically, Spider-Man is also still alive, and it can and will eventually multiply to rebuild itself, or himself, or their self, whatever you want to call him. I don't know. And finally, in at number 1 today, it's Patton Parnell. I think this is the most terrifying version of Spider-Man I've ever seen. Maybe even more so than Spider-Man, and he's a colony of spiders. Patton Parnell is nothing like Peter Parker. He's a sociopath, a maniac, and he has the ability to transform into a monster Spider-Man hybrid with 8 eyes, 8 limbs, and massive spider-like fangs. Seeing this bald monster thing crawl around your walls and ceiling, that's scary enough, but knowing that he ate at least 3 people, including his uncle, and can implant hundreds of baby spiders into you just by biting you is absolutely nightmare-inducing. Luckily, he gets defeated pretty soon after his creation by Morlun, but at the time, Patton Parnell from Earth 51412 was around. He was very, very powerful and extremely scary. Kicking off our list at number 10, Spider. We are kicking off the list talking about a Peter Parker variant that's bonded with the Carnage symbiote coming from Earth 15 known as the Spider. This Peter coming from Earth 15 is a much more sadistic version of the web swinger. He's also a ginger, so that tells you all you need to know. The Spider claims that he has been sentenced to a total of 67 life sentences in prison for the crimes that he has committed, but of course, to make him just a bit more lovable, he has a great sense of humor, very much like that of Deadpool. It's great if you can look past a lot of the extra creepy factors of his character. The Spider was introduced in Exiles number 12 and was a big part of the reality-saving team featured in it, being a sometimes leader of said team. He was a very interesting take on what most people are used to from Spider-Man, having only like his humor and his leadership to make him genuinely likable. As a Carnage-bonded sociopath, he was pretty powerful, but he nonetheless was sent a one-way ticket to the afterlife with a blast from Firestar in Exiles number 44. Number 9, the Amazing Spider. This version of Spider-Man, similar to the Spider, is also evil, but instead of this being caused by a symbiote, on Earth 11638, it's actually the inclusion of Uncle Ben that makes this character go bad. In this world, Uncle Ben never loses his life, and instead, he helps train Peter Parker with his new spider powers, and eventually even helps him to form Parker Industries. Peter and Uncle Ben end up building a machine that allows Peter to lure other alternate versions of Spider-Man to this reality, where he promptly absorbs their powers to increase his own. It's incredibly evil, but it makes him the most powerful hero on that Earth and eliminates the need for any other hero to even exist. His whole plan came unraveled when he tried to do this to the Spider-Man from Earth 616 though. When faced with our main Spider-Man, the powerful version of Peter loses his life and his soul is sent to hell, where he becomes fused with the spirit of vengeance, becoming the Ghost Rider Spider. And it's incredibly cool. Number 8, Takuya Yamashiro. Instead of being Peter Parker, the Japanese Spider-Man, Spider-Man, is Takuya Yamashiro, a motocross racer and son of astrophysicist Dr. Hiroshi Yamashiro. Unlike most versions of Spider-Man, Takuya was introduced through a live-action Japanese Spider-Man TV show. With that, his character is, 1, really popular, but also differs quite a bit. For starters, his spider powers are a little less powerful due to budget constraints for the show, but to make up for that, he utilizes a whole frickin' mech named Leopardon. He uses Leopardon and his spider abilities to fight the Iron Cross Army, which is a group of suspiciously human-looking aliens from an unnamed world who are led by Professor Monster. Yes, I know it's a dumb name, just let it go. Due to his popularity and just how awesome he is, Takuya has become an official character in the multiverse, coming from Earth 51778, fighting against the Inheritors alongside the Spider Army, and he is set to appear in the second animated Spider-Verse movie, which is gonna be great. Number 7. Peter Parker. Fans of this channel may know the special place that Marvel 1602 has in my heart. Written by Neil Gaiman, the story takes tons of familiar heroes and villains and displaces them into an Elizabethan setting. Our friendly neighborhood Spider, being the face of Marvel, obviously got his own 1602 version. In this world, the orphan Peter was raised by his Scottish uncle Benjamin and his wife until one year, on his birthday, Sir Nicholas Fury came to his door. Fury had known Peter's parents and sought Peter to enter into his service, and he became Fury's assistant. Now that alone, a Peter Parker who worked under Nick Fury, is a cool concept. But I think one of my favorite parts about this version of Peter is that he doesn't actually have his spider powers. Throughout the run of the comic, which saw Peter escorting Virginia Dare, visiting the Doctor Strange and Professor X of this world, meeting a ton of royalty, having run-ins with the Hulk, and traveling to the New World, Peter kept almost coming into contact with certain suspicious looking spiders. It wasn't until the last issue of the initial comic when he was finally bit and gained superpowers. Number 6. Spider-Man Noir. Listen here, see? After seeking out sweet vengeance on the criminal known as the Goblin for taking away the life of his Uncle Ben, our young hero Peter Parker goes off to a warehouse to do some investigating. Turns out that there is a spider idol in this warehouse containing thousands of spiders. Once the idol is broken, one of these spiders bites Peter, prompting an incredibly real version of a spider god, who seemingly grants the abilities of a human spider on our hero. He is granted most of the same powers as regular Spider-Man, with a bit less strength and a stronger healing factor. He also gains the ability to use organic webbing, which can be gross, but in this time it's cool. Spider-Man Noir may not be the most powerful alternate spider. There are plenty of others who have added abilities, but he has the power of popularity on his side, not to mention a killer look and story that makes him a fan favorite character ever since his introduction. Number 5. Spider-Man 2099. Instead of getting bitten by a radioactive super spider, Miguel O'Hara's DNA was biologically mixed with a spider's DNA to save his life after he was forcibly hooked on a not far off future substance by his employer. If that sounds convoluted, well, yeah, it is, but it also sounds right at home in a comic book. Although the process of gaining his powers differed from Peter Parker, Miguel was still granted some of the same abilities at a pretty similar level. One thing that differs largely is Miguel's spider sense. He doesn't have one. Instead, Miguel has advanced super senses similar to someone like Daredevil. Miguel also has some abilities that are just wholly unique to him. For example, he possesses an incredible level of super speed, as well as telepathic communication abilities, both of which are really cool. He also has fangs and claws on his fingers and toes that he can use in combat, which is still cool, but a little bit freaky. On top of all those powers though, Miguel is from the year 2099, which obviously means that he naturally has a much more advanced set of technology at his disposal. But it's not just his powers and technology that make him better. The Spider-Man 2099 story is awesome, but you'll have to do the necessary reading to figure that out for yourself. Number 4. Mayday Parker. First appearing in a What If number 105 from December 1997, Mayday Parker is the daughter of Peter Parker and Mary Jane from a future alternate world. Coming from Earth 982, Mayday Parker becomes Spider-Girl and eventually Spider-Woman, filling in the role that her father once held. Where she is only slightly weaker than Peter in the strength department, she is much more agile, which I didn't even know was possible. Mayday also has a stronger, more precise spider sense, but on top of those advancements, her ability to stick to surfaces is considerably more powerful than Peter's and is actually pretty unique. Wall crawling does not come as naturally to May, and she has to concentrate to stick to surfaces, but she also has the ability to transmit her electrostatic stickiness through surfaces, making everyone and everything else stick to that surface, which is just nuts. What's even cooler is that she can reverse the ability, and instead of stick, she can repel. This adds power to her jumps, but can also be used to repel even people and objects away from her at speed. Mayday is awesome, and I can't wait to see what Marvel does with her going forward. Number 3. Ghost Spider. Spider-Gwen, or Ghost Spider, is Gwen Stacy, Peter Parker's first love interest, but from the alternate reality of Earth 65. In this reality, Gwen Stacy is bitten by the spider, granting her powers and keeping Peter Parker as some nerd, but also her initial love interest. Gwen was granted superhuman strength, speed, toughened flesh, and pretty much all the spider-based powers that the regular Spider-Man would symbiote possess. Where she differs in a pretty big way is that after Gwen was depowered, she instead successfully bonded with the Venom symbiote. Gwen learned to find a very healthy balance with her symbiote. When she first bonded with Venom, thanks to a Matt Murdock version of Kingpin, she was rage-fueled and looking for revenge, but over time she realized that she needed to control that and give Venom better qualities to enhance in order to find balance with the symbiote. So in a way, Venom and Gwen became even greater heroes, helping each other out. Number 2, Miles Morales. Following the passing of Peter Parker in Marvel's Ultimate Universe, Miles Morales was bitten by an enhanced spider that caused him to pass out and foam at the mouth. When he awoke though, he discovered he had superpowers, and that's pretty cool. Taking on the role of the new Spider-Man, Miles is one of the only characters to fully inhabit the Spider-Man mantle with almost complete support from the fans. Miles Morales is an incredible character. He has his own villains and interpersonal connections to make him wholly his own, but having the Spider-Man name also pulls him into contact with many mainstays of the Spider-Man mythos. He has almost all of the regular Spider abilities plus some amazing powers unique to himself, like his Venom, which is like a form of bioelectricity that he can emit from his body. Miles is also able to use a spider camouflage to make his whole body go invisible. Miles was so popular that his character got pulled over to the main Marvel universe after Secret Wars, making him one of the few surviving characters from the Ultimate Universe. And finally, in at number 1 today, it's Ultimate Spider-Man. Speaking of the Ultimate Universe, I think it's only fair to talk about that universe's Peter Parker. The Ultimate Spider-Man comic run is considered by a lot of people to be one of the absolute best Spider-Man runs ever. Being one of the best things to come from writer Brian Michael Bendis, Ultimate Spider-Man revamped the origin of the Spider-Man character for modern audiences in the 2000s, but also made Peter Parker even younger. The story follows the original story pretty closely, with only minor tweaks and changes that make it even better or more digestible for younger audiences, like the fixes made to the Clone Saga story or even the changes made to the Venom symbiote. The Earth 1610 comic book run had one writer at the helm, which really helped to maintain consistency throughout the story, whereas Earth 616's Amazing Spider-Man carried on for 50 years and had many writers coming in to build the story, unfortunately giving it areas that lacked to some degree. Ultimate Spider-Man took a great idea and then ran with it, building up an incredible cast of characters and injecting a great deal of emotion and heart into the story as it took familiar ideas in bold new directions. That's why Ultimate Spider-Man is the number 1 spot for Spider-Man alternates who can even attempt to be better than the original. Coming in at number 10 is Superior Spider-Man. This version of Spider-Man is technically not an alternate. He comes from the 616 Earth and fits into the regular Spider-Man continuity, but so many of you guys suggested this Spider-Man, and how am I going to say no to you guys? For those of you who don't know, the Superior Spider-Man is actually Dr. Otto Octavius, but you may have noticed he's decidedly less out of shape, and that's because Otto was able to finally defeat Spider-Man by transferring his consciousness out of his own dying body and placing it into the healthy, superpowered body of Peter Parker. With Peter's consciousness seemingly passing away inside of Otto's body, it's like Freaky Friday, only much more serious and with Spider-Man. You might think that a villain inhabiting the body of Spider-Man would be a bad thing, and in some ways, you are right. Otto was extremely ruthless when using the powers of Spider-Man, but the thing is, he was still operating as a heroic Spider-Man. Inside the body of Spider-Man and sharing all of Peter's memories, Doc Ock had a bit of a change of heart and decided to use his vast intelligence and unrelenting nature, dedicating himself to being a better hero, a superior Spider-Man. Number 9, Spider-Punk. First appearing in Amazing Spider-Man Volume 3, number 10 from November 2014, Hobart Hobby Brown became Spider-Man when he got bit by a radioactive spider from illegal waste dumping and decided to use his powers to go against the authority. Hell yeah. The President of the United States in this reality is Norman Osborn, who is also still the CEO of Oscorp. Funnily enough, Oscorp in this reality also created Venom, aka VENOM, aka Variable Engagement Neurosensitive Organic Mesh. So, Venom here is created in a lab, like a bioweapon, one that President Osborn gives to his lackeys and dons on himself. So it's an army of Venom-powered soldiers led by a Venom-powered President Norman Osborn. But Spider-Punk also has many of his own followers behind him. Fighting for their beliefs, the Spider Army is a group of punks ready to stand their ground with Spider-Man as their punk rock leader. Unfortunately for Osborn, their venom is just as weak to sound as the Venom we all know and love. And we are shown this when Spider-Punk plays his electric guitar at full volume, completely blasting away the symbiotes as the two groups clash. He bashed his guitar on Norman's head, defeating him and liberating everyone. It was awesome. It was super cool. Number 8. Spider-Man. Yes, I am including a poorly drawn version of Spider-Man on this list. Speaking with bad grammar, foul language, and mainly in dirty quotes that I am simply not allowed to utter on YouTube, Spider-Man isn't for kids. But he's still a Spider-Man, dammit, and one with cultural impact. Spider-Man was created on February 5th, 2011 on MS Paint, I'm pretty sure, and he traveled into the web of the internet, popping up here and there for years. Unfortunately, in the real world, the creator of Spider-Man, YouTube channel Jordan Clory, passed away on February 14th, 2022, which was 11 days after Spider-Man's 11th birthday. Spider-Man is quite self-centered, often going on and on about how he has swag. But he isn't so self-centered as to not come to the aid of the Spider-Verse in the animated Spider-Verse movies. While not a central figure to the story by any means, he is seen briefly while going over the countless versions of Spider-Man throughout the multiverse. Number 7. Spider-Boy. In the world of the Amalgam universe, Peter Parker was the head of the team trying to create a clone of Super Soldier, who was a Superman Captain America amalgamation. The clone used the DNA of Peter, making it technically a clone of Peter Parker, and it had the power to warp gravity. Unfortunately, an explosion took Peter's life and awoke the clone before the time was right. In this universe, General Ross took the clone under his wing, adopting him and naming him Peter in honor of his creator. Peter, Ross, and the General made a pretty happy family until Uncle Jen was then robbed of life by a mugger. This then prompted the clone to go on as Spider-Boy, a cross of both Spider-Man, or even of Ben Reilly if you think about it, from Marvel, and Superboy from DC Comics. Spider-Boy was an instant favorite of the Amalgam universe, but unfortunately DC and Marvel don't get along like they once did, so we probably won't see him for a very long time. Number 6. House of M Spider-Man. So this version of Peter Parker, like a lot of other people in the House of M reality, actually had a better life, at least in the beginning. He stopped the robber who would have taken his Uncle Ben's life, so Uncle Ben is still alive, and the two created a version of Parker Industries. Since he stopped the robber, he also had a lucrative career as a wrestler, and then he became a very successful actor, even working with Mary Jane Watson, helping to make her a star actress. Gwen Stacy also never passed away, so Peter and her married and had a child together. The problems really come for this Spider-Man when the mutant-human war finally began. Peter, being so famous as a superhero, was immediately accused of being a mutant, but under the guidance of his Uncle Ben, Peter went along with it, pretending to be a mutant, becoming an idol for mutant children everywhere. A false idol though. It was only a matter of time before he was found out, and then he came under public fire for misrepresenting himself as a mutant for years. A movie he starred in about his life was pulled from theaters, stock in his business began to tank, his family members were forced to seclude themselves in their estate, and the conflict became so bad Peter had to fake his own passing and go into hiding. Number 5. Tom. I remember when I learned that the new Spider-Man who would be swinging into the MCU would be Tom Holland, and while at first I think I and a lot of people were skeptical of anyone who would step into the role of Marvel's #1 hero, Tom really killed it. Coming in for the first time in the MCU's Civil War, not only did we get the coolest intro to Peter himself with Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man, but then the guy shows up at the airport battle and the first thing he does is steal Captain America's shield. And then he proceeds to make Falcon and the Winter Soldier look like complete chumps. But then we got a whole trilogy of films, each one knocking it out of the park, and almost followed a backwards approach to the films before it, giving us Peter living life in high school for 2 whole movies before he finally comes into his own at the end of the 3rd film, and now the character can go literally anywhere. I just want to know what's gonna happen next. In at number 4, Andrew. The second person to bring Spider-Man to the big screen, Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man movies were a mixed bag. Some people were not as much of a fan of the Sony-backed films themselves, but almost no one I know had a complaint against Andrew himself or the way he played Spider-Man. Of the actors to play the wall crawler, I think this Spider-Man had some of the best quips, and he also looked freaking sweet. The chemistry between Peter and Gwen Stacy was also incredibly real real feeling, which made it all the more emotionally devastating when Peter lost her. The villains of this version of Peter also had a much more genuine connection to the hero than the MCU version of the character. We got to see him create his own web shooters, unlike either of the other live action versions, showing us how smart he actually is, and this version of Peter was a much more believable and likable oddball. If you ask me, the first movie was better than the second, but man, I wish we got a third movie. Number 3, Toby. If we're gonna talk about Tom and Andrew, we need to talk about the first one to bring it all to the screen. Tobey Maguire. This version of Spider-Man, and honestly his supporting cast, all gave a life to the character and characters of the Spider-Man mythos that we had never seen before. Peter in this universe is much more dorky. Like, you really believe that this guy is a big old nerd turned superhero. But it also makes him incredibly likable when coupled with how much of a genuine hero he actually is. Not only that, but his connection with Uncle Ben and Aunt May was probably the most real of any live action adaptation, which made it so much more real when Peter lost his uncle. The other thing with the original trilogy of Spider-Man movies is that Peter struggled. His character was constantly trying to make money or keep his relationships afloat, he was struggling to pay rent, and he was taking care of Aunt May, all while trying to balance being a web-swinging superhero who was constantly losing his powers and dealing with his idols always becoming some of the best supervillains to come to movies. Well, at least in the first 2 movies. Also, we got Bully Maguire, and that's really cool. So, number 2, Pavitr Prabhakar. Pavitr Prabhakar first came to us in Spider-Man India #1 back in January of 2005, and man, is he awesome. As a young poor kid, Pavitr went to live with his Uncle Bim and Aunt Maya in Mumbai. Pavitr was bullied on the regs, and while being chased by other kids one day, he came into contact with an ancient yogi who ended up giving him the power of a spider to fight against evil. While figuring out his powers, Pavitr refused to help a woman being attacked by several men, and this led to the passing of his Uncle Bim at the hands of those men, since Bim tried to help her when Spider-Man wouldn't. And just like that, as with all Spider-Men, Pavitr learned that with great power comes great responsibility. His powers, weaknesses, and pretty much everything else are very similar to Earth 616 Spider-Man, but usually with a bit of a mystical twist given the way in which he received his powers. He has faced villains like Nalin Oberoi, a crime lord who used an amulet to get demonic powers, and Dr. Octopus, who had demon arms that were given to him by Nalin. In the Spider-Verse, he battled alongside Superior Spider-Man, Spider-Man UK, and all his other alternates as one of the best of the bunch. Finally, in at number 1, Ben Reilly. Technically, just like Superior Spider-Man, this alternate Spider-Man isn't an alternate Spider-Man at all. Ben Reilly is a Peter Parker clone from the 616 continuity, but don't think that makes him any less awesome. Ben has all the same powers as Spider-Man with a much darker story. As Scarlet Spider, Ben was a favorite among fans, even outshining Spider-Man himself on a few occasions, but he has gone through so many twists and turns throughout his time. So after being created by a villain known as the Jackal, Ben would be defeated, but in secret he would go into hiding for 5 years, returning to New York as the Scarlet Spider. Ben even stepped into the role of Spider-Man himself during a brief period of time, and at the end of that arc, Ben would lose his life, only to be resurrected and then taken to the afterlife over and over and over again by his creator. This drove him completely insane, driving him to overthrow his creator and become the new Jackal. He eventually went back to being the Scarlet Spider, became Spider-Man again, and now he is the totally awesome Chasm.
Number 10, Kraven the Spider Hunter. We know on Earth 8 there is a Spider Woman who happens to resemble Kraven somewhat, but did you know that on Earth 31 there actually is a Sergei Kravinoff who simply is Spider-Man? Yep, Kraven is known as Hunter Spider, who after being exposed to a giant spider's spider venom while hunting a lion in Zimbabwe, became himself a spider-themed hero. Hunter Spider specifically focuses on hunting spider-themed villains in New York City. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, if you love it when we talk about alternate spider folks, be sure to let us know by clicking that subscribe button. I know there's a bunch of you out there that aren't subscribed, and if that's who you are, maybe subscribe. It's a nice thing to do. Helps us out. Number 9. Spider. Spider. Penny Parker's story is really just strange. I mean, even her superhero name is pretty strange. SP//DR. Penny Parker hails from the reality of Earth 14512. Here she pilots a mech that is connected to her through her genes and a spider bite. The spider bite connects her to the suit, as the spider that bit her actually makes up half of the mech suit known as Spider's CPU. In her alternate reality, she also has a rival in Addie Brock, who ends up as the pilot of the mech suit known as Venom, or as it's spelled there, VEN #M, or £, if you prefer. Penny is weird in the sense that a lot of her story, while still echoing the canon, feels like such a fresh take on the origin of Spider-Man, which is also why I love it. Number 8. The Spider. On Earth 15, Spider-Man is the exact opposite of a hero. He is a villain, a criminal, and one of the most extreme kinds of criminals, a serial killer. He merged with a symbiote that is basically Carnage to become the Spider. His sense of humor is extremely dark, and he actually takes joy in hurting others. Despite joining the Timebreakers, the Spider later tries to take over multiple different universes and ends up being killed during his attempt. So while he is really creepy and disturbing, at least he's gone now. Or at least he's gone for now. The Spider was one of the characters and teammates that appeared in Exiles, making his first appearance in the 2001 Exiles series in issue number 12, but eventually was killed in issue number 44. While we know about Peter Parker and his role as the Spider on Earth 15 as a serial killer with a symbiotic suit, we don't really know anything else about his home reality. So yeah, I wonder if all the other heroes are also villains there. Number 7. Spider Bite. I am so happy that I get to talk about Spider Bite. She was actually my favorite spider-themed hero to appear in the Vault of Spiders comic, and she's also definitely a weirdo in the best of ways. She hails from a world where people actually spend most of their time online as avatars, which is pretty weird. Spider Bite is actually Margot's avatar, or one of them, rather, that she wears in the digital space. She fights to protect people in cyberspace by donning her Spider Bite persona and apprehending cyber criminals. Seriously though, how cool would it be if we actually had a hero like this on, the internet, on cyberspace? Although this might seem like a strange reality to some, the cool thing about Spider Bite is it kind of feels like she could exist in our own future. I mean, already people spend a lot of time online, and we have things like VR, Oculus, and even digital land. So this could very well be our own future. Honestly, we maybe need some vigilantes on the internet. Number 6. Doppelganger. Doppelganger is known for being one of the most vicious and evil spider people out there. He was actually created initially during the Infinity War event by the evil version of Adam Warlock, known as Magus. During that event, many different heroes had to fight against their evil alternate selves, or fight against the evil alternate versions of fellow heroes and friends. Doppelganger was one of these, but despite being killed during Infinity War, he still managed to reappear again in the comics, returning in Maximum Carnage and wreaking havoc every time he manages to pretty much pop up, which happens actually surprisingly often when you consider how many times in different ways he's actually died over the years, but he's still kicking. Number 5. Ghost Spider. I feel like some people are going to be offended by some of the spider folks I'm calling weird on this list, but I would like to take this time to remind you that weird doesn't have to be a bad thing. In fact, weird to me usually tends to be a good thing. Usually, weird to me just means something that is extreme or unique in some way. Something that stands out. And standing out, honestly, it can be quite a good thing. In fact, in Spider-Gwen or Ghost Spider's case, I feel like her being weird is a big part of the reason why I love her character, and why I think a lot of us love her character. In almost every other universe, Gwen Stacy tragically dies, and is actually a huge part of a staple canon event for most Peter Parkers or Spider-Men out there. But in her home reality of Earth 65, things were different. Instead of her dying, it's Peter who becomes the Lizard, and he dies. And this is surprisingly rare. There are very few realities where Gwen even gets to stay alive. Primarily, I can only think of House of M and Gwenpool's home reality off the top of my head. So in the sense of standing out, Ghost Spider truly is a lovable weirdo, as the girl that not only lived, but herself also becomes a spider-themed hero. Pretty cool. Number 4. Patton Parnell. Patton Parnell is one of my favorite alternate versions of Spider-Man. If you thought Spiders-Man was creepy, wait till you meet this guy. Patton Parnell is the Spider-Man of Earth 51412. In this reality, Patton stands in for Peter, but instead of being a good guy, he's kinda just a creepy guy who enjoys making ants burn on the sidewalk with a magnifying glass as part of his experiments. However, Patton is likely a sadistic and creepy person because he actually has a pretty rough home life, often being mistreated by his Uncle Ted. In the end, when he receives his powers, they turn him into a monstrous, more evil spider-like creature who ends up mutating into something more monster than man. This version of Spider-Man has only ever made his first and last appearance in Edge of Spider-Verse issue number 4 from 2014. Though honestly, I would love to see more versions of Patton popping up around the world. He's pretty cool. Number 3, Bagman. Bagman is an interesting character. Although many of us consider him to be an alternate thanks to the costume's appearance in events like the Spider-Verse and properties like Marvel's Spider-Man, where this is one of the costumes you can roam around the city in the comics, this was only really a moment in Peter's life, at least in the main continuity of Earth 616. Bagman's origins come from the time when Peter went to Reed Richards for help with his black costume, which it turned out was actually the symbiote Venom, and after being separated from the Venom symbiote, used this outfit as a temporary replacement costume. It was made up of a fantastic suit loaned to him from Johnny Storm's The Human Torch and a paper bag, which had 2 holes cut out for eyes that he would wear over his head. Bagman's appearance throughout Spider-Verse content, however, implies that somewhere out there exists a world where Spider-Man never stopped wearing the Bagman outfit. Although, we've never visited that world, but I would love to. At least I don't think we have. Number 2, Miles Morales Animated Spider-Verse Trilogy. The Miles Morales of Into the Spider-Verse has a somewhat different origin story as we learn in the latest film in the trilogy, Across the Spider-Verse. Mild, I would say pretty mild, spoilers ahead for those who have yet to see the film, as that's the Miles we are going to be focusing on here. So we're not focusing on comic book 1610, we're going to be focusing on animated universe Miles from Earth 1610. The one from Sony's animated multiverse, if you will. But at the same time, I'm going to try and keep this more general and avoid getting too specific, so hopefully this will be quite a mild spoiler if you want to listen that won't ruin the movie for you at all. At least that's what I'm hoping. Hope I'm not ruining the movie for anyone. That would make me sad. And Across the Spider-Verse, we learn that Miles' origin is actually unique in the sense that it connects him to another reality. This is interesting and unique for his origin story and makes him more of a standout or odd, weird, you might say, character when it comes to the fact that technically he could be considered the Spider-Man of a different reality than his native one of Earth 1610. I found that very interesting, and I think it makes him kind of weird in a great way. In an intriguing way. Number 1, Bagman. If you thought Bagman was weird, wait till I tell you about Bagman. Yep, you heard that right. You remember Spider-Man? If you aren't familiar with her, a quick recap for you. She is an alternate reality spider-themed hero where instead of Peter Parker ending up with spider-like powers and abilities after being bitten by a radioactive spider, May Parker, his aunt, receives them instead after she was bitten while delivering a forgotten lunch to Peter while he was on a field trip at school. In this reality, May Parker is the hero known as Spider-Man, with Peter and Ben being part of her crime-fighting team and offering her support in terms of tech know-how and heart. Bagman appears as one of the alternates in the 2019 Spider-Verse comic in issue number 2 that Spider-Man reached out to get help from, reaching across the multiverse in order to defeat an evil alternate version of herself who was actually Carnage, an alternate Carnage, and an alternate May Parker.